Hey, gang. In the long ago, one of the first vids I ever posted up on this channel that was actually content, at least, way back in, let's see, 2021, was a comparison on TrackIR in what was then the relatively new Tobii eye tracker. While I thought it was a cool piece of tech, ultimately I felt like TrackIR gave more bang for the buck. So almost 5 years on, is this still the case? Well, for one, Tobii's now integrated into Star Citizen, whereas TrackIR is still third party. But even so, can the eye tracker unseat the OG? Finally, unlike seemingly every other Star Citizen content creator out there, I am not sponsored by Tobii. So I don't really have a horse in this race other than to give you the honest info I felt like I didn't have access to. I've been using TrackIR for a long time, so I'm tossing in the caveat that I'm still learning or relearning Tobii and what it can and can't do. For this comparison, I'm using Tobii as a head tracker rather than tracking the movement of my eyes, which honestly really annoyed me in the last vid. Bonus that this comparison will be much more one-to-one, as both trackers will be doing essentially the same thing. Good? Good. Let's get into it. And no, I'm a little better at pacing than I was 5 years ago, so this one better not clock in at the 20-minute mark or something really went off the rails. I'll start with a quick overview of the two systems and how they work, the hardware and the software. Let's start here. TrackIR uses a two-part system, an IR sensor and an IR projector, these antlers that you can clip on your headphones or hat. This is all USB, and it's a weird Y-shaped setup with the cables. Depending on your setup, that could be a problem. For example, I custom made my old desk, and the cord had a long way to run. It made it so unless you're, say, sitting on your couch playing on a TV or something, it should still be pretty good. It should be fine. That said, the wires are a consideration. There is a wireless version, but it's third party and kind of a Chinese knockoff, if we're being honest, even though it's likely sent out from the same manufacturing plant that the originals roll out of. Mine worked great for about 2 weeks, my wireless version, and then it wouldn't work unless it was plugged into the charger. So that kind of nullified the point of it being wireless. So I would say your mileage may vary, but probably avoid the wireless third party one. That said, TrackIR has been around for a while, and it's kind of surprising they never rolled out an official wireless version, but here we are. The software looks like this, and you can tune in how you want it to work pretty precisely. While it takes a bit of testing to get what you want, that's true of the Tobii too. So actually, let's get into that. Then you got Tobii. Like TrackIR, you've got an IR projector and reader. But unlike TrackIR, Tobii has built them into the same piece of hardware, so no antlers. The projector is basically using your eyeballs as a reflector, and if you ever had the Kinect system for Xbox, it's kind of a similar idea here. It's basically spraying the room with beams to read the room. Tobii is similar tech and can read where your head is moving. Cool thing about this is that while it can definitely track your eyes, as the name suggests, it can also track your head. And with the settings, which I'll get into in a minute, they run a spectrum in between. The software is pretty straightforward. You tune it with this and, well, that's it. And not it. Which brings us to, so popping into the game, let's check out what the settings look like. Since it's easier, let's start with TrackIR, since it's the easier of the two to set up. Yeah, since TrackIR isn't directly supported in the game, all the settings, well, I'd say most of them, are handled outside the game in the TrackIR software I showed you earlier. However, there's a couple options here that work for any head tracking, TrackIR included. First, and this is pretty important, you have to have the TrackIR software fired up before you launch the game. For whatever reason, if you fire it up after the game's running, even if you haven't left the menus, it's not going to recognize that it's there. Provided you've done that, you need to select the TrackIR from this drop-down menu. From here, you have a few options available from this laundry list. The ones I like are the ones that add to my immersion. So working in FPS and being able to roll my head or look around while looking down a barrel. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like in game. So just trust me that this looks very similar while you're flying. And if nothing else, any sort of head tracking is not only way more immersive, like life-changingly so, but will also give you a massive advantage while you're flying. You can see TrackIR is pretty snappy and reactive. A lot of that, well, okay, I guess all of that is in the way that I set my curves in the original TrackIR software. Now let's flip over to Tobii. So the good thing about Tobii is that it's natively supported in Star Citizen, so it just works as long as it's on. Or if you turn it on after the game has started, it'll still work. And here's where you can dial everything in. Unlike TrackIR, where there's kind of an agreed upon curve setup that most people have settled on over the years, Tobii's got so many options, you could really spend a while dialing it in, but you can really dial it in. As you can see, the end result is pretty similar to the TrackIR. Okay, so let's get into the good stuff. After my last vid, I realized I had used the TrackIR for long enough that I didn't even realize that some of the more annoying things were just things that I kind of glossed over just because I was so used to them being around. Like having to have the software on before starting the game, or one of the reasons why I went for Tobii over TrackIR recently is because if there's any IR source behind you while you are gaming, it can throw off the TrackIR system. It'll read it as an emission from the antlers, even if it's not. And this is really common if you have a window behind you with sunlight coming through it, or if you have a wall behind you that sunlight is hitting. It can really overwhelm the sensor, and then you have a conflict between the antlers and the IR source of the sun hitting that location. Not a big deal if you're in your mom's basement, or the near constant, almost muscle memory of tapping a bound key to recenter the view. That said, Tobii has a similar issue, and I noticed if I play for a bit, the view gradually starts tipping to one side, so definitely go in and bind that key that'll recenter the view. I thought that was just a TrackIR thing, but it turns out I just didn't use Tobii long enough to see that. So let's get into the upsides and downsides. First off, cost. TrackIR can be had for anywhere from, I'd say, 140 to more typically around 180. And that's for the whole thing, including the hat reflector thingy that I never used, but might be a good option if you don't like all the wires. Tobii, on the other hand, rolls in at around $360. So yeah, pretty steep climb up the cost ladder. But if you're a Star Citizen player, that's probably not a huge leap for you, but something to consider. In my experience, TrackIR is more responsive. You move your head and it just feels more sudden in game. If you're a competitive PvPer or a dogfighter, that's probably pretty important to you. It seems like there's just a little bit of lag with Tobii. Nothing too noticeable, but it's definitely there. The movement feels like it's probably about a half second behind where you're actually looking. I'm guessing this has something to do with the smoothing the system has to do for eye tracking, but even when it's set to head tracking only, it's still there. But if you're a casual player, that might not be a big deal. Finally, the fact that Tobii's natively supported in Star Citizen, I mentioned this a couple times, is a pretty big deal. But is a big enough deal to justify spending $220 more on the system? Well, yeah. A few years back, I was solidly TrackIR. Now, Tobii's solid. I mean, it better be for $360, right? The weird thing is that I'd say if you're competitive and engaging in a lot of PvP, TrackIR is probably the way that you want to go. If you're more casual, it's probably Tobii. The reason why I say that's weird is that in every other case that I can think of when I say that, the less expensive unit is usually the one that's dialed in for casuals, but that's not the case here. There's a lot of in-game dialing in you have to do with Tobii, and that can get really finicky, especially if you're not entirely sure which setting is causing the issue. With TrackIR, you just need to set those curves in the same way, and that's pretty much it. You're done. And there's a lot of directions online of how to set those curves, and everybody does it the same way. But that customization is also a big strength of Tobii. And if you do want it to track your eyes rather than your head or do some combination of the two, well, TrackIR can't do that. And TrackIR does require those horns, or at least the reflectors. I'm using Tobii these days, and honestly, the antlers were part of it. I'm not a casual player, but I'm also not a hardcore competitive PvPer these days either. Really, like so many of these things, I'd say it comes down to taste and cost. TrackIR's snappier and clunkier, Tobii's smoother and supported in-game, and honestly feels a little bit more solidly built. Anyways, I hope that helped you make a decision, decide if you want to shell out money for the system all the other content creators are shilling for. You get either system though, and you'll be happy with it, if I'm being totally honest. The immersion is really, really incredible. I do suggest going with some sort of head tracking if you get this game, because it really is game changing. And that's all I got for this one, gang. Catch me next time.